Wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everyone. If where you are, it's actually afternoon. Welcome to panel two of the BGHRA conference. We're so happy to have you join us for this conversation. We have three incredible papers that will be discussed. In terms of the order of what we'll do, I'll do a brief intro of each speaker as they speak. We'll go in the order of the program. First, we'll have Priya Kumari, followed by Bisaula Joy, and then lastly, we'll have Ajibola join us. So first, I'll start by introducing Priya Kumari and giving the title of her paper, and then she will be the next speaker. So Priya Kumari is currently enrolled as a doctoral candidate and senior research fellow at the Center of German Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi, India. She holds a BA and MA in the literature of German-speaking countries. Her research interest lies at the intersection of culture and literary studies, Black and Afro-German literature, memory, guilt, identity, and recognition politics in German-speaking literary cultural productions. Her dissertation entitled Identity and Cultural Crisis in Lucia Ngombe's autobiography, Child Number 55, My German African Odyssey, primarily studies the identity and cultural crisis faced by an Afro-German in East Germany and the cultural shock that she had to undergo while working towards her transcultural identity. Her PhD project, entitled in English, The Politics of Identity, Recognition, and Integration in the Selected Black German Literature, focuses on the cultural theory of similarity and difference with respect to the politics of memory studies, colonial amnesia, decolonization, and integration of Black Germans in German society from post and decolonial perspectives. She has also taught language courses, German as a foreign language, and information on German-speaking countries after 1945 at the undergraduate level, and at the Center of German Studies at Nehru University in India. She's also the recipient of numerous prizes and scholarships and participated in various international summer schools, and finally also presented papers on various international platforms. The title of her talk is The Forceful Silence and Unrecognized Black Germans, Representation of Pain and Fear in Olivia Wenzel's 1000 Coils of Fear. And I should note that in the chat, all of the paper titles and names and email addresses have also been posted, so you can see her title there if you want to refer back to it. So the floor is now yours. Priya, welcome.
Uh, Hello. Yeah, you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you so much, guys, for the introduction. And I would like to thank the BGHRA committee, first of all, for giving me the opportunity to share my paper with you all. And right away, I'll start my presentation for this day. So, the topic of my presentation is the forceful silence and the unrecognized Black Germans, representation of pain and fear in Oliver Wenzel's Thousand Coils of Fear. The novel is originally written in German with the title Thousand Serpentinen Angst and got published in 2020. It is translated by Priscilla Line in English with the title Thousand Coils of Fear. The author of the novel, Olivier Wenzel, was born in 1985, Weimar. He then was located in East Germany. This literary work is drawn on Wenzel's life, but it is not clear who the narrator and interlocutors are. The narrator chose to remain unnamed till the end of the novel. The narrator is not the author herself, but she has created the narrator who is near to her. It is an auto fiction novel that talks about the life of a black German queer woman who is born to a white German mother and a black African father. The novel reflects on the difficult relationship of the narrator with her white German grandmother, who has become the supporter of the right wing ideology. This literary work is heavily influenced by the author's own socio-cultural life experiences, which include the real life racial trauma faced by the author, but still we don't know But still, we don't have any way of knowing how far Wenzel's experiences are similar to the narrator's experience. Since the story is narrated in an autofictional mode, it contains the magical realist characteristics. The novel is narrated in three parts with a multivocal dialogic narrative form. It does not follow the linear form of storytelling, instead, it randomly changes its time and space of narration and keeps swinging between the past, present, and future. It is not an organized text in the sense that the narrator's life in itself is not organized but is full of disturbances, fears, anxieties, trauma, pain, and depression. So the Wenzel's novel starts with a scene where the narrator is standing in front of the vending machine at the train station, which is also a space of escaping for her from the outside world and feels safe inside it. And she gazes on the outside world. It is written in a fragmented manner and reflects the sudden appearances of historical events, disrupts the present, and gives the reader sudden uncomfortable sense of disruption in the linear narrative form of storytelling. One can observe the flashback of abrupt coming of the past incidents in the present and future throughout this autofiction novel. The narrated time in the novel is around 20 years, but as mentioned above, it does not follow a linear chronological structure. Winsel uses the transtemporality, which is also termed as insurrectionary time, as a narrative aesthetic strategy, as discussed by Sarah Colvin in her very rich text, Freedom Time, Temporal Insurrections in Olivier Wenzel's Thousand Serpentinen Angst, and Sharon Todua Otto's Ada's Raum, where a meaning is deepened and rendered complex across time and space. It subverts the linear chronology, and also it is insurrectionary in the grammatical structure as well, which means that it does not follow the conventional grammatical or sentence formation rules. The readers will have the impression that the novel is written in a dialogical mode with ish undu in small letters and ish undu in capital letters, in caps. The narrator's voice is written in small, while the interlocutor's voice is written in caps, which is also the interrogating voices of the police officers or the narrator's friend who are interrogating or questioning her. Since the story is narrated in a non-linear fashion, the past and the present events keep emerging in the novel simultaneously. This can also be related to the title Thousand Coils of Fear, which shows the entangling nature of the story narration. It is going back to the same incident or event from where it started, but it does not form a complete circle or ends the story before starting the new conversation. Instead, it keeps on moving forward as we can see the narrator keeps going back and forth while narrating the events of her life and her psychological condition. And she also takes the story further like a coil which moves in forward direction. The narrator remembers the violence and the fear of violence as something that has not only dominated her and her brother's childhood but is intimidating her present also. Taking reference to the theoretical essay by W.E.B. Du Bois, The Negro and the Warsaw Ghetto, in which he had shown the intersectionality between the history of Nazi Germany with reference to the Holocaust, the Afro American history of slavery, and the problem of color, this paper tries to explore the representation of fear and memory of Nazi times in Black German literature that haunts and affects the people of color till today in contemporary Germany. And they live with the quotidian fear in their everyday lives. This intersectionality of Black Germans and the Holocaust history in this paper has also been drawn from Michelle Rothberg's essay on W.E.B. Du Bois in Warsaw, Holocaust Memory and the Color Line from 1949 to 1952. And a point of reference has been taken from there to connect the history of Black Germans and the Holocaust memory in Germany with the problem of racial discrimination and othering, because as we know, many minority communities were perceived as other and were systematically uh, executed or exterminated during the Holocaust. It is also a consequence of colonial amnesia followed by Germany towards its former colonized countries and is one of the causes of ongoing discrimination faced by the Black Germans and people of color. As for example, Wenzel's narrator had the fear of neo Nazis in contemporary Germany, and the physical as well as the verbal attacks on her have become the order of the day. It represents the same fear, pain, and struggle which the Jews or the blacks experienced during the Nazi regime of terror. One can also observe this from the following lines expressed by the narrator in the novel, and I quote: right wing terror is, not being able to laugh at their stiffness, for fear of being seen. The biggest and the stoutest of the group has a swastika tattooed on his chest. Right wing terror is when the atmosphere suddenly changes. My boyfriend and I remain awkwardly in the shade. One of them says loudly, "Oh, there was a nigger in the bottle," and the word stabs me between the ribs. I have no idea what the right thing to do is. Right wing terror is we as well withdraw silently. Right wing terror is after 2 hours of searching, the police still can't find it. Quote ends. Priscilla Lime talks about this banal racism attempted against the blacks in everyday life in her lecture on Suspicious Spiral, Autofiction and Black German Subjectivity in Olivia Wenzel's Thousand Serpentine Angst, where she is, and I again quote, categorizing the racism and discrimination that the white Germans maintain their white supremacy in their everyday life, but which they either deny or fail to acknowledge as racist because they consider themselves as too tolerant and enlightened to be racist. Quote ends. This racism is banal in the sense that no one is attacked physically or confronted during the violence happening. Then she draws our attention to the spectacle which is required to prove that the racial discrimination actually happened by producing the physical evidences of discrimination. Line elaborates on spectacle and mentions the George Floyd case, uh, who was murdered by the state police, where the white Germans needed physical evidence to march or protest or even recognize the threats on the black community. If there is no spectacle or evidence, then the blacks are left on their own. Also, the sentence, "My boyfriend and I remain awkwardly in the shade," indicates the active resistance shown on the part of the narrator and her boyfriend as they sat where they were and didn't withdraw from the beach after coming of the Nazis immediately, like other families left. The word shadow also represents the invisibility of the black community intentionally created by the dominant whites. This sentence also gives the impression that the black Germans are remained unrecognized, though they are always present in the German society since historical times, but are never seen. Instead, they are continuously being pushed on the margins of the society. That is why, when the Nazis came on the beach, they didn't notice the narrator and her boyfriend sitting there. This also goes for the literary and cultural productions by the blacks. And this silent withdrawal due to fear of their lives or got beaten up by the right wing supporters and unable to express anything against the crimes done by such people shows the helplessness of the narrator as she further narrates, and I quote again, "When I get home, I have the feeling I have done something wrong. I have neglected to do something. Right wing terror is I still think about this day and the impossibility of knowing how should I behave. Right wing terror is I am ashamed of my cowardice. Right wing terror is I was once that kid at the lake." The combination of fear and the inability to say something, this powerlessness, the inability to act, I understand. What do you do to fight it? Try to be aware of it. Quote ends. The narrator has critically examined this stiffness and self assured behavior after the arrival of the Nazis at the beach. She observes their behavior and the rigidity of their bodily attentiveness, and she writes, and I quote, "They fold their clothes together, are standing erect and stiff on a hot summer day, naked and self assured, looking at one of the lakes in Strausberg, as if it belonged to them." Quote ends. This stiff and rigid behavior also presents that these right wing people have the complete right on the property, be it lake or any public institution or facilities like trains, etc. It appears as if it belonged to them without questioning their right to be anywhere, and are very much self assured that they are not even feared of being naked with a swastika tattooed on their body. These similar attacks, be it verbal or physical, are repetitive as narrated in the novel, usually at the train stations where she was stared or gazed by the whites. We got to know that the narrator's brother also committed suicide at one of the train stations due to continuous and repetitive racial discrimination attempted against him, and the interlocutor intervenes with the thoughts, and I quote, "The whole thing is pretty redundant. What?" At the train station, the Nazi. Always these stories in which something happens, but ultimately nothing does. And it's always the train stations. Something did happen to me. The problem is not that my recollections repeat themselves. Rather, The problem is that these things themselves keep repeating perpetually, that they never stopped. So, a quote ends. This repetitive behavior of racial discrimination on everyday basis leads to quotidian violence, which results into the quotidian fear, what Colvin also explained in her article Freedom Time. The quotidian violence maintained by the Nazis on the beach and by the white German couple in the train is an indication of the imposition of white supremacy in public places. The narrator felt to interfere and stand with the farmer, with the father of the black kid on the beach because she has also experienced this kind of racist violence in her childhood in public sphere, where she and her brother were targeted by the white couple and said they should be sent to concentration camp. The muted bystanders didn't extend any support to the narrator or to her brother, except their mother, who confronted the couple. During this entire journey, the narrator with her brother was afraid and feared because of this verbal racist discrimination that the man will come and do some harm to them. The narrator describes her fear as, and I quote, "Suddenly I noticed that a man and a woman, perhaps in their 30s, are staring at us. He screams that we need to get away and then yells descriptions of our bodies that I will never forget. During his tirade, he turns to face us every now and then, keeps screaming. For example, he says we belong in a concentration camp, that we will be gassed there properly, and that soon the right train will come for us." Quote ends. This quotidian or the constant fear accompanies the narrator her entire life, which also led her to seek help of the therapist to come out of this depression that has caused by this constant fear since childhood. The act of looking away from this racial discrimination reminded me of the short film Schwarzfahrer, The Black Rider, directed by Pepe Danquart, which brilliantly depicted the experience of a black man traveling in a public transport, that is, train in Berlin, and got the sitting place next to the white German old lady. As soon as the man sat next to her, the old lady started verbally accusing him by slurring to him and saying they breed like rodents. She subhumanizes the black community entirely and call them rodents. The microaggression shown by the old woman against the black man expressed through this verbal violence and not through the physical violence here can also be observed in the Winsel's autofiction novel as well. And therefore, to conclude, one could observe that even by the end of her novel, Winsel has not provided any sort of relief to the narrator or depicted any goal which is being achieved by the narrator. One could interpret this unending goal in a way that racial trauma of the narrator, being a black German, is ongoing and unending, not only in the novel but also in real life of the author as well, and is ever present or ongoing. But she is giving a futuristic perspective and a possible future by giving the narrator a ray of hope of being pregnant and a sense of hopefulness in the society coming through her child. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I would love to take your questions, comments, and your observations. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Priya. And I just want to add that if folks have questions or comments, we'll have our next presenter up in a second, but you can feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom to go ahead and just start populating that chat box with questions or comments for our presenters as we move through. So we'll take questions at the end when everyone is completed, but you can go ahead right now and start to, again, put your comments in, put your questions in for our presenters as they speak. Also in the chat feature, separate from the Q&A, you can also see all of the titles, email addresses for our speakers. So next up, we'll have, pull my proper notes up here. Next up, we'll have Bisaola Joy. I'll give her introduction and the title of her paper. Bisaola Joy comes from Nigeria. She obtained her bachelor's degree in German and French from Obafemi Awolowo University, Nigeria in 2018. She obtained her master's degree in German studies at the University of Florida in the spring of 2022, where she wrote a thesis titled Black Lives Matter, Decolonizing German Cinema in the 21st Century. Bisaola previously worked as an adjunct lecturer at the University of Florida, where she taught German courses as well as African cultures and literature seminars. She is currently an independent researcher in Germany. Her interests include, but are not limited to, Black German studies, memory studies, media studies, film studies, and comparative literature. The title for her talk is Harmonizing Heartache, the Paradox of Joy and Pain in Music. Welcome, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. I would like to share my screen shortly. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yes, okay, thank you. So my title is Harmonizing Heartache, the Paradox of Joy and Pain in Music. Music has the ability to evoke a wide range of emotions, from joy and exhilaration to sadness and fear. However, there exists a paradox in certain songs where the lyrical content conveys themes of sorrow, heartbreak, or despair, yet the beats of the song are pleasant and melodious. This juxtaposition creates a unique listening experience, inviting listeners to navigate the complex interplay between conflicting emotions. In this paper, we delve into this paradox of joy and pain in music, exploring how songs that blend contrasting emotions serve as reflections of our experiences and avenues for escape from negative emotions. This paper will focus on 4 unique songs, which are the Italian folk song Bella Ciao, the Ivorian band Magic System's Premier Gaou, the Belgian artist Stromae's Papa Ute, and the Austrian band Wanda's Schick mir die Post. These songs belong to the genre of folk, Zulu, pop, and rock, respectively. The theoretical framework for this paper draws upon the perspectives of formalism and absolute expressionism, while the former examines the musical elements of a composition, that is the notes, the sounds, and beats and rhythm. The latter examines the ability of the song to provoke emotions by examining the lyrics, the background of the song, the cultural context, and the listener's subjective experience. So due to copyright reasons, I won't be able to play any of the songs, but I will sing a line from 3 of the songs just to see if these are songs that we are familiar with. So the first one is Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao. The second song is Ute Papa Ute. It's quite popular. The third one is quite popular on the African continent, and that's Premier Gau, Andi Premier Gau, Depa Gau. And the last one is Vanda's Schick mir die Post, Schick mir die Post schon in Spital. So how do these songs connect with joy and pain? That's what we'll find out. Music possesses emotive qualities. From a formalist perspective, the emotional tone of a song is often conveyed through its musical elements, such as tempo and tonality. Cheerful songs typically feature rapid tempos and major tonalities, while mournful songs tend towards dragging tempos and dark minor tonalities. Formalists argue that our perception of music's emotional content is based on its structural properties rather than its impact on our emotional states. Conversely, Absolute expressionism persists that music is experienced with emotion, and its value is dependent upon its ability to evoke emotional responses in listeners. According to this theory, music serves as an emotional influencer capable of eliciting a range of feelings that may originate from both the artist's intentions and the listener's own emotional context. So I move on to the analysis. The first song, Bella Ciao. The Italian song Bella Ciao means goodbye, beautiful. And the song was originally sung in opposition to the harsh working conditions in the paddy fields of northern Italy. The song later became the anthem of the Italian resistance movement, which opposed fascism and the German occupation during the Second World War. The song overall starts with slow tempos that gradually become rapid. Overall, the song has rapid tempos. And the sense of pain that we get in the song lies in the historical background as well as the lyrics. Some of the expressions, as you can see on the screen, some of the expressions and between insect and mosquitoes, that's applies to the paddy, the workers on the paddy fields, and between insects and mosquitoes, the boss is standing with his cane. Oh my God, what a torment. And this expressed the harsh working conditions that the workers experienced on the paddy fields, as well as the authoritative and oppressive structures. Then the other version is the partisan version that has sentences that are bold on the screen. Because I feel death approaching, and if I die as a partisan, which indicates the constant peril faced by partisans where death was a threat looming at any moment. This song has undergone various lyrical modifications and has also been used for protest in countries such as Turkey, Chile, India, Ukraine, Iran, and Tokyo. And this same song has been remediated and emerged in the Spanish film La Casa de Papel, which is popularly known as Money Heist, in 2017. Another version of the song emerged during the COVID-19 lockdown called Corona Ciao. The juxtaposition of its uplifting melody with lyrics of struggle and sacrifice exemplify the paradox of joy and pain, highlighting the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. So the second song, Premier Gao by Magic System, is a Zulu song by the Ivorian band Magic System. The song is quite popular on the African continent, especially in West Africa. And with multiple music streaming platforms, it is safe to say that its popularity transcends beyond the African continent. The fast-paced song with major tonalities has an irresistible beat that compels listeners to dance regardless of their intention. The song has garnered over 11 million views on YouTube and sparked numerous TikTok challenges. And it's also a vibrant anthem for celebratory gatherings on the African continent. The song is originally in Nuchi, an Ivorian youth language that combines French with other Ivorian languages such as Baoulé, Mandinka, and Dioula. And it is an autobiography song of the lead singer, Salif Traoré, also known as Al Safo. The lyrics tell the story of an aspiring musician whose girlfriend leaves him because he's poor. One of the lines there says, it's at my low points that the girl and two left me. And the popular So yes, left me, and he becomes rich, and then she sees him on TV and tries to win him back. He turns her down, saying he would only become a fool if he took her back. And that part is exemplified with the catchy refrain, on dit premier gaou n'est pas gaou, c'est deuxième gaou qui est nyata. And gaou simply means fool, and nyata is a bigger fool. And the sentence simply means, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And the pain in the song lies in the heartbreak that the singer experiences prior to becoming rich and famous, while the joy lies in the fast beats. So the third song is Papa Ute by Paul van Haver, also known as Stromer. It's a pop song with fast and elevating beats. The song, with over 1 million views on YouTube, has influenced dance challenges across social media platforms like TikTok and Instagram. Inspired by the artist Stromae's own experience, the song reflects on the absence of his father, who died during the Rwandan genocide. His mother didn't inform him about his father's death until he was 12. And the sense of pain we get here is the death of his father due to the genocide and the longing for what you cannot replace. And this is evident in the recurrent refrain, Ute, which Papa Ute, which is dad of Papa or father, where are you? And another sentence here is, I must have counted my fingers for at least 1,000 times. That was him waiting for his father. Then another important line is, everyone knows how to make babies, but nobody knows how to make papas, which indicates the irreplaceable nature of death. The final song, Shake Me at the Coast, belongs to the fast rock genre with rapid tempos and major tonalities. And within the formalist analysis, the energetic beat qualifies it as a happy song. The lyrics, however, express a sense of despair, resignation, and a desire for escape. Although the autobiographical nature of the song remains uncertain, it narrates the experiences of an individual in a state of despair. He is in a troubled state of mind and desires relief or release from suffering. The singer repeatedly mentions that Ismail should be sent to the hospital, which is the title of the song, Shake Me at the Post, schon ins Spital. And also mentions, ich will zum Himmel fahren, so schnell wie es geht. I want to go to heaven as fast as possible, which indicates a longing for an escape from the current situation through death. It also mentions kein Haus am Land für mich, or yeah, no house in the country or in the countryside for me, which may also symbolize a lack of stability or a feeling of not belonging. It could also represent a sense of loss or unfulfilled dreams. The paradox of joy and pain, that is joy in the beats and pain in the lyrics or the background of the song, transcends cultural boundaries. This paradox manifests in various types and genres of music across different linguistic contexts. From a cultural perspective, music characterized by fast-paced rhythms has consistently functioned as a source of solace and solidarity across diverse societies throughout history. For instance, within the context of the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, songs such as Brenda Fassie's Black Presidents and Prophet of the City, Never Again, exemplify the role of music in advocating for social change and resilience against oppression. Another example is found in the works of the late Nigerian musician Fela Kuti, particularly in his piece Sorrow, Tears, and Blood, which reflects themes of economic hardship and oppression. One of the catalysts for singing about your pain is how empowering it can be. The artists sing about their pain so that they do not remain in their place of pain. This phenomenon is also evident in various musical traditions, including African American spirituals, which serve numerous functions such as uplifting both singers and listeners. Additionally, contemporary artists like Taylor Swift utilize their music for example, Taylor Swift's album of breakup songs as a means of processing personal experiences and emotions. Furthermore, medical professionals increasingly recognize and utilize songs as a therapeutic intervention to aid individuals in effectively managing challenging emotions and promoting emotional well-being. Now to my conclusion, the paradox of joy and pain in music offers an insight into the human experience, reflecting our capacity to navigate complex emotions and find solace in artistic expressions, whether through folk music, pop, rock, rap. Music serves as a powerful medium for storytelling, healing, and transformation. By embracing the duality of joy and pain, we affirm our shared humanity and celebrate the transformative power of music in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. These are really, generative papers. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Again, for folks who have questions or comments, as they're speaking, you can go ahead and just input those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. We'll have conversation at the end after all of our presenters have spoken. But go ahead right now if you have questions or comments, just to go ahead and pop them in the Q&A. All right, so I want to introduce our final speaker for the panel. Okay, and our final presenter is Ajibola Fabusuyi, is a PhD candidate of Germanic Studies at the Department of Central, Eastern, and Northern European Studies, UBC Vancouver. His research interests include Black German studies, migration studies, translation studies, and comparative literature. Currently, he is interested in exploring the diasporic experiences of minorities in Germany. This includes narratives that not only document lived experiences of systemic racism, marginalization, and exclusion, but also celebrate personal and collective triumphs. He currently explores Sankofa as an African-oriented epistemology to theorize Black becoming in contemporary Black German cultural materials. He is a fellow of the African Humanities Program, or AHP, and also is a recipient of Diversity and Inclusion Research Grant of the Waterloo Center for German Studies. We're really happy to have Ajibola with us this afternoon, and so right now he has the floor. It is yours.
Thank you, Keith. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Perfect.
Okay, great. Give me just a moment. Can you also see my screen?
Yes, audio is good and the visual is also good.
Okay, great. So yeah,
Did you want to go to slideshow mode, or are you fine the way it is now? Just want to make sure you're good.
okay, let me see. Let me go to slideshow mode. Yes. Okay. Great. So my The title of my paper is Mixed Race Black Germans as, in quote, bastarded, and the N-word Mischlinge. I'm presenting a counter-hegemonic ancestral knowledge in Johnson Spain's autobiographical film, Becoming Black, that was produced 2019. As a way of introduction, the autobiographical documentary Becoming Black by Berlin-based filmmaker Ines Johnson Spain premiered in Amsterdam in 2019 and has since been screened in many cinemas all over North America, Europe, and Africa, winning many awards and nominations. In this paper, I examine Becoming Black to illustrate how Sankofa philosophy can be deployed as a guiding mechanism by which to think about Black life in the diaspora. Specifically, I illustrate how the film's Sankofa practice become a countermeasure against the hegemonic rhetoric of bastard or the N-word Mischling and other racializing and dehumanizing acts through which oppressive discourses have sought a way to ascribe non or incomplete Germanness and Europeanness to Black Germans. One of such acts include taking German children of Black and African heritage away from their families and keeping them in homes or institutions. As a reaction to such violent attitudes in the public simply for having a Black parentage, some post-World War II mixed-race Black German children and others born years after them have embarked on heritage journeys to their Black roots. These journeys often span continents, cultures, histories, and find expression in Black documentation practices, such as the documentary form. I consider these documents as a reaction on the part of Black Germans to the social system that have historically sought to delegitimize them, especially in Germany. The relational and discursive practice they deploy is that of Sankofa philosophy. The case of Becoming Black is interesting for a number of reasons. Having undergone several layers of denial of her Black identity, Johnson Spain recognizes a need to deliberately become Black using Black self-narration and self-determination. In Becoming Black, she demonstrates her Black becoming by putting herself in the center of her ancestral African culture in Togo and Benin and regards these activities as a performance of Blackness because they give the Black heritage filmmaker the power of subjectivity to tell a story of identity in the most authentic form in Sankofa style. Now, I would like to briefly talk about the way Sankofa as an African epistemology and theoretical approach for reconstructing the past for for spiritual recovery, healing, and reconciliation. Sankofa originates from the Adinka tribe of the Akan nation in Ghana and emphasizes the wisdom in looking to the past to understand the future. Sankofa translates as go back and fetch it, return to your past, or as Christa Temple puts it, it is not taboo to go back and retrieve what you've forgotten or lost. The Sankofa symbols themselves also point to the depth of knowledge contained in his philosophy. Its most prominent symbol is that of a bird whose head is turned back while holding an egg in its beak, and his feet are facing forward. Temple suggests that Sankofa as a practice afford the diaspora community of Africans the possibility of a cultural definition and is a way of reimagining the cultural casualties sustained by involuntary immersion into Western culture. Jennifer Slater also argues that Sankofa practices are most useful in encouraging a dialogue with indigenous African belief systems, not only to recover the spiritual treasures of the people, but to also rectify the past colonial-minded evangelism that led to plunder of African spiritual essence. I would also draw from BGHRA Yusuf for a phenomenological explanation of my analysis of the documentary. To expand my argument for thinking through Black and African diasporicity in terms of origin, identity, and becoming. According to BGHRA Yusuf, the world we are located in has already been marked out by others. It is always already imbued with values, traces, and forms of significance that precede our occupation. In this case, the body's motility and reaction to the world is not only enforced by its immediate environment, but also by values, attitudes, privileges, and freedom that precede it. But BGHRA Yusuf also recognizes racial experience and the awareness of self in the phenomenology of embodiment. She argues that such categories such as race, ethnicity, class, gender, and age not only form the identity of a person, but also determine the person's consciousness of their diasporicity. Here, I argue in alignment with BGHRA Yusuf that many Black Germans embody a distanced and disconnected past, but that such embodiment is especially reflective of racial discourses around and about them. Post-war Black German cohort and the project of discovering Black ancestry. To clarify, reconnecting to the Black roots is not an entirely new project for Black heritage Germans. An investigation revealed that a few Black German scholars and activists, such as Anton Wilhelm Amo and Mai Ayim, have engaged in it before the most current wave in the past few decades. However, there are little or no records of major autobiographical projects by the aforementioned Black Germans that are specifically dedicated to their Back to Africa journeys. Now, I go to my analysis of Black becoming. Before then, I'll do a little summary. While growing up with a biological white ethnic German mother, her stepfather, Ami, and her brother, Michael, in an East German town in the 1960s, Ines Johnson Spain has always been curious about her skin color, which in relation to the rest of the family is darker. This curiosity is further raised when, at the age of 12, Michael stumbles on a medical document relating to her and shows her. The document shows that Sigrid, the mother, had attempted to abort the pregnancy of Ines, but was refused by the authorities. It turns out that she had an affair with Lucien, a Togolese student studying in a trade union college in Bernau at the time, though she was already married to Armin. Sigrid later reconnects with Armin, but keeps her daughter in a kinderheim for 3 years. Please note that, as was a usual thing to do with Black German children at the time. Armin eventually adopts Ines as his child, but the issue of her paternity is kept out of discussion. My analysis will illustrate an African view on the ideas of family belonging, kinship, values, and tradition. My analysis will cover 4 scenes in the documentary film which help illustrate Sankofa practices and its unassailable connection to Black belonging. I will focus especially on cinematography, editing, and voice. And using Sankofa as an analytical approach, I will discuss how Johnson Spain also relies on photo evidence, personal interviews, and direct engagement in the ritual of her kinsmen and women, and which allow her to not only discover her heritage, but also entrench herself in her Africanity. Editing. The documentary starts with only the sound of waters, then comes the still camera shot overlooking the boundless waters of the Atlantic Ocean in a West African coast. And soon the audience hears Johnson Spain's narrative voiceover recalling an event that took place decades ago in East Germany, where a mother soliloquizes about her meeting with Lucien. This disconnect between image and sound and between past and present illustrates Johnson Spain's past that's shrouded in confusion and an attempt at bridging that with the future, hoping to gain some clarity. Moreover, opening this past event on African soil plays a motif signaling a homecoming that is to come. I will also talk about cinematography. In this scene, Johnson Spain illustrates in a most effective cinematography an instant that triggers a disconnected past in phenomenological terms for her as a child when asked about her parentage. In a dialogue with her stepfather, Armin, in this incredibly affective scene, she remembers meeting some people around the African embassies in Grabe, where she asks her where she's from. Amina agrees that this must have been a heavy burden on her because he answers Zobal in Akla Nebelastung. The burden described here results from a myriad of confusion created in the mind of a child, Johnson Spain, who was put in Kinderheim while her brother Michael stayed at home with the parents. In this iconic moment of the documentary, the double take of the camera captures the deeply furrowed face of Armin and the sorrowful yet stoic face of Johnson Spain, while its lenses linger on her face to capture her tears of long years of confusion and denials. More than telling a story, the episode forces the audience to partake in the shared pain of two individuals who suffered the racism they had no control over. Now, like Germany, the Togo Benin southwestern part of West Africa, where Johnson Spain father is from, also has its own share of societal prejudices. But unlike Germany, which has historically delegitimized other Germans based on their ancestry or skin color, the Togo Benin southwestern Nigerian societies regard people as bastard in quotes on the grounds of a lack of paternity. The native law and custom in many parts of this area, despite recognizing polygamy just as it does monogamy, ironically places much premium on marital fidelity. Indeed, the marriage framework of the customary laws in these areas is patriarchal and frowns on the idea of women having children out of wedlock. Ironically, again, a man is empowered to confer legitimacy on a child he fathered. So does his family, as the next slide will illustrate this most clearly. The idea of conferring legitimacy to a long-lost child is illustrated in the very laden first words, one of the first words spoken by Johnson Spain's Togolese family members on her arrival in a paternity home in Togo, setting the tone for this performed belonging, bienvenue chez toi. Here, the documentary also takes the audience back through discourse time in Togo, where the women in Johnson's family explain what the awareness of paternal roots means to a child and to the entire extended family. From the dialogue that ensues, it becomes clear that the family gatherings for the Johnsons serve as moments of reunion with family members from far and wide and an opportunity for old and young members to remind themselves where they spring from and essentially belong, illustrating one of the guiding principles of Sankofa. For Black diasporans who retrace their steps to their ancestral communities in Africa, knowing one's parents and their ancestral community is merely a part of the process of returning home. The spiritual aspect of Sankofa includes observing family age-long rituals and cultural practices. One of such is the observance of rites of welcoming of a son or daughter back into the family and praying to the dead, which is illustrated here. Apart from that, many communities and families in this area, Togo, Benin, southwestern Nigeria, part of West Africa, share a common belief in reincarnation. And as discussed, is also a crucial element of Sankofa, that is learning the family history, especially to recognize one's affinities, including physical and behavioral affinities with certain members of the family, dead or alive. Johnson Spain is believed to have been a reincarnation of an aunt, Equa, because of their similar looks and potential similar character traits. Hence, our father names her Akusuabe, hoping that she would not inherit her aunt's stubbornness. In conclusion, while Germany did not legally deny post-World War II Black Germans citizenship, the public discourses about them have nevertheless been that of denial. This has led many in recent times to make recourse to their Black roots. These iterations suggest a deliberate painting of duality of cultural experience in Black identity creation and becoming, placing the experiences of structural racism, exclusion, and neglect in the land of birth in opposition to cultural acceptance in their land of heritage. They therefore invite another way of thinking through the themes of migration, home, and belonging. In my own analysis of Johnson Spain's work, I've tried illustrating how this is the case, but I'm also interested in acknowledging and articulating these processes' adherence to Sankofa methods. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajibola, and thank you to all of our presenters. These are all really fascinating talks. I'm looking forward to our conversation, which is about to begin. I just wanted to remind folks again, I see a couple of questions already in the Q&A, but please go ahead, and if you have comments, questions, you can go ahead and put those there so we can get started. So our first question comes from Helen Okoye. She writes, "Thank you for the insightful presentations. My question goes to the second presenter. I appreciate the role that music plays in promoting healing from a diverse array of negative emotions, particularly as it relates to Black people's experiences of being Black. We have seen Blacks in many countries taking to religion and gospel music. For instance, we see many Black priests and gospel artists, particularly in the USA, among Black individuals who challenge racial oppression. Was this the case in Germany? Did Germans also use gospel music in this way?"
Hey, thank you, Ellen, for the question. I do not know of any instance actually where Germans used gospel music as a form of healing. But when it comes to religion, say Black Germans, for example, I do know that when some Black Germans connect with their roots, they adopt some of the religious practices of their ancestors. And a good example is Ines Johnson Spain in Becoming Black. And she visits her family in Togo, and there was the voodoo rites. So in terms of religion, I know that Black Germans, some of them have connected to their roots, but in terms of music, I do not know of any instance where Germans or Black Germans have used gospel music as a form of healing. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. We have another question from Emily Fraser Rath, who's also a BGHRA conference program organizer, committee member. "It seems as though the concept of Sankofa directs us to look for what is lost or forgotten in the past, rather than what has been reified in the past and what has led to the present, in order to imagine and build better futures. I'm wondering if it is necessary to focus at all, then, on the derogatory and discriminatory ways that dominant culture and language has painted and represented and continues to paint and represent Black German communities.
Thank you, Emily. It's such a great question that I've been hoping that will come in the course of this panel. Yes, Sankofa directs us to look for what is lost or forgotten in the past, rather than what's been reified in the past. At the same time, Africa has a lot of proverbs, and part of that is saying that we have to take some steps backward in order to be able to forge forward. So Sankofa does not, as much as it wants us to look at what is forgotten in the past, part of Sankofa is also to look at what is what is unclear in the past, what is bitter in the past, and what is good in the past. So I believe that in Black Germans' attempt to look at what was forgotten in the past, the Sankofa does not say that what they have experienced in the past should also be jettisoned in this sense. Incidentally, it also says that what has happened to them and individuals, apart from what they should have known about their own past, about their own ancestry, and that everything should come to the fore whenever they are performing Sankofa. That is to the extent to which I understand the Sankofa philosophy. That's why I also intentionally bring those specific parts of Johnson Spain's past that she also decided to bring to the fore, so that all our past experiences will be able to gather, she'll be able to gather them and to be able to forge ahead. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I have a question as well, while other folks are populating questions in the chat, which kind of I think all presenters can answer in different ways. So I'm struck by the ways that the concept of time links together all three papers that we heard this afternoon. In Priya's paper, you were thinking really about the impact of trauma. And in a conversation I had just this weekend, I was speaking to someone and they said something was really stuck with me. He said that when you go through trauma, it locks you in time. Like you become stuck in time. And the work of many of our adulthoods is actually kind of working through not having that pain time travel with us. So if the pain occurred when we were 10 or 12, to not have that painful memory define us even into our adulthood. And so this idea of the coil, this idea of things repeating, right, is really, the predicament of the narrator, that they're also kind of reliving personally, but also there's a kind of state-sanctioned violence, and there's also these other acts of aggression, which are repeating trauma on both a kind of political, personal level. And so I'm wondering then, so this is a question for Priya, but again, I think it migrates out to the other presenters as well, then what will be the alternatives to that kind of recursive pattern to having, being locked in time by trauma? Like, what does another formation of time look like? And I think this matters as well for the other presenters, specifically Bisaula and Ajibola as well, because you're also thinking through question of time as well. I think this question of music, like, do we define, the joy that comes from music formally or through some framework of absolute expressionism, is also a question. Does the tempo define the joy that we see? And is it alternative to, I mean, I think you're somewhat suggesting that, you know, there is an alternative to the formalist definition of tempo as defining joy, but maybe you could say a bit more about how, like, the equation of time within that system. And then for Ajibola as well, obviously, this question of Sankofa is not simply a spatial movement, right? Moving from looking one direction to another. But when in the film in particular, right, the characters are moving from one place to another, they're also in some sense moving backwards in time, like moving forward through space, but there's also some wrestling with temporality. And in the last scene where you talked about reincarnation, I mean, reincarnation is a total disruption of what we might imagine is kind of a Western kind of linear model where we kind of check off the years and we can never go back. Reincarnation, in some sense, says that whole system is bankrupt, right? Like we can't have a clear separation between past, present, and future. There's also something here about maybe about Black futurity as well that I'm hearing in terms of how each of you is kind of working against or with conceptions of time. So I hope that my reflections aren't too jumbled and make sense. But I would allow if Priya wants to start just to kind of reflect on what's happening with time in particular.
Uh, Thank you so much, Kai, for this little, really complicated question. But I will just like try to understand like how Olivier Winsel has narrated time or has used trans-temporality narrative strategy to express her anxious, traumatic, and pain in the novel, and she has actually through this novel she has jumped back and forth. So the memories of the past or the traumatic uh, incidents of the past, she has abruptly brought it into the present and expressed it by using this transtemporality notion. And she could able to also write it or express it in the novel. But as you said, when you go through trauma, it locks you in time. But in the novel, the narrator is getting a possible future, or she is having the uh, futuristic goal, in the sense that uh, she is getting the possible future by getting pregnant, and she is looking forward for a child who is going to maybe bring her out of that traumatic depression which is she is going through because of the death of her brother, because her brother committed suicide. So in a way she is going back, but at the same time she is also thinking about the narrator is also thinking about the future. So this possible future is actually helping her in coming out of that trauma. So this is what I can say right now to your question.
No, thank you for that. I think that's a really interesting observation. You mentioned at the end of the presentation this idea of pregnancy and reproduction, which I think also kind of ties into, I mean, in some sense, we might imagine reincarnation as being this kind of highly metaphysical and beyond kind of what Western systems might allow for. But certainly reproduction, birth, is a very natural process of reincarnation in some sense, right? So I think that does provide a way to think outside of whatever trauma you might be locked in, even although, of course, then birth also raises the question of how do we kind of pass heritage and culture and language and stories on, and if those, if birth then also becomes another way in which the trauma is continued. But I definitely appreciate that way of thinking of it. Sure. Um, um, be Sala, would you like to jump in as well in the conversation here?
Okay, yes, sure. So regarding what you said about the concept of time and the impact of trauma, not to let the pain define us into adulthood, and just the things regarding trauma and time in relation to what I have presented. I think I would say that so talking about music and time, some believe that time heals trauma, and others who believe time does not heal trauma. Yes, I'm looking at it from that perspective of time and healing. I do not necessarily know if I believe that time heals or not, but I would say that music is always available, and throughout historically, music has been there, and it will continue to be a source of solace, even if it's a temporary relief at the time, or a temporary form of expressing the pain that you feel at that time. When you sing about your pain, you feel some level of relief. It doesn't take your pain away, no, but expressing it is healthy, and it is also empowering when you sing about your pain, which means that you're not staying, you're not dwelling in your pain. Yes, I don't know if I responded in the way you would like me to respond.
No, that your response is perfectly fine, and I totally agree. I like that you said that perhaps healing isn't, the results, but it's a way to process, right? That the music becomes a way to kind of process. And I think that certainly if we're deconstructing kind of a certain model of time would suggest that there's a past and present and future, then getting past the language of healing might also be useful because certainly like I love sad songs and to kind of go along with your comments, then if a sad song brings me joy, that's a paradox, right? Like if I'm hunting for songs about breakups and things which are seemingly depressing, but they give me a kind of joy, then it really complicates this kind of black and white image of simply joy or pain, right? I mean, both of those things are inhabiting the same space at the same time. So, in these songs, certainly, I think maybe processing of emotions is happening, but healing is too grand of a concept.
Yes, I would like to add, so you mentioned that you like sad songs, and my presentation was about, songs with fast beats and with sad lyrics. So do you like the song with sad lyrics and fast beats, or or slow beats?
They can be sad in any number of ways. So they can be sad, as you pointed out, where it's contradictory in the sense that the song is fast tempoed, but maybe it has like subject matter which is somewhat sad, or it can also be where it's both. It's kind of happens on where the speed of the music, or it's it has the violins kind of classically playing in the background. Like all those things can work for me. But I think there's also, I mean, speaking to kind of, I guess, the framework of absolute expressionism, which I thank you for bringing us that language and that framework, where the subjective experience matters. And so even if a song could have a fast tempo and a happy subject, there could be a way in which we could also experience that for whatever reason in a kind of very, somber way. So I guess to answer your question, yes and yes. I like all those things.
Yeah, if I can jump into, I'm trying to react to, I think your question is kind of two ways. The first part, where you were questioning about being locked in time by trauma. Yeah, that's a thick one. Yes. Now, you also talked about later about a concept of reincarnation as whether that is not actually European, which again rings a bell in my mind as okay, repressive. So yes, we will always and when I talk about we, I mean minorities in a large population, minorities within a majority will always, to a very large extent, be asked or theorized to or told how they can or how they should approach or how they can express their how they can express their experience. So I believe that, and I'm sure most of us here will understand that when it comes to Black German cultural productions, they have been in different ways. My IM probably believes in African heritage, but doesn't dwell in it so much, apart from using it as a way in the diaspora now to use it as a discursive process to say that yes, I am Black and German and so, but what I mean is that unlike people like Johnson Spain, she doesn't want to push the idea of going back to the very past as to say that, okay, I want to look at what are the things that I have lost in the past. What makes me who I am today? What is the makeup of that my Blackness, which many Black Germans were not even allowed to explore. But so there will be this group of people that would believe in going back to their Africanity, and just to be able to then validate their Blackness in the diaspora, to say that, you know what, this is what formed me, whether that part of my life was part of my upbringing or not. Now I know about it, and this is how I want to approach it. So there will always be that question as to whether they want to use stay stuck by that trauma. I think is the best way for them to just express themselves. And you also talk about whether the idea of reincarnation is not specifically European. Well, maybe the word reincarnation as a term itself may be European, but it is a concept that we, and when I say we, because I come from this part of the world where Johnson Spain is from, not as a Francophone African, but I am talking about that Benin, Togo, and southwestern Nigeria, the Yoruba, Ajibade is already nodding. So these are the parts. So this is the part that we belong to, and we belong a lot. We believe a lot in reincarnation. So which tells us that it is not entirely European. European may probably have some understanding of it, but it just speaks to the idea that, like Johnson Spain expressed in a documentary film, that the father kind of changed the name, the local name that he wanted to give her, to not be exactly the spelling of that of the aunt, but he just named her that in order for her to not have that stubborn character of his own sister that he always knew. But in one of the scenes in the play, and one of the elders told her that decision was not the best decision anyway. From our belief, what will be will always be. So this is the spiritual side of you. Whether you like it or not, you are going to manifest it. So, and your manifesting it doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It could be positive, it could be negative. So these are the parts of the things that Sankofa allows us to do. It doesn't restrict us to only the positive side of our past and stuff. So I hope I've been able to. I know there is your questions seem to be a bit longer than this, but this is the part I was able to pin down.
No, thank you for that. That makes total sense. And really, what I wasn't saying that reincarnation is a Western concept so much as saying that I think reincarnation troubles like Western linearity in the sense that kind of the stable past and stable future. I feel like reincarnation, because it involves so much of the Sankofa aesthetic, right, philosophy, disrupts that's, but I think you explained it wonderfully. I
Awesome.
wanted to get to also another question that popped up in the question and answer. So also again from Emily, thank you so much. It's for Priya. I'm curious to hear more about why you've chosen these particular texts. Otto Ada's Realm and Wenzel's 1000 Coils of Fear, and if there are other texts that you are working with, perhaps which are lesser known.
Uh, yeah, thank you, Emily, for this question. Yeah, actually, I'm working with other texts as well. So I'm basically I have taken three autobiographies, and these are namely was weiße Menschen über. So it is in German. So what white? I'll just try to translate the title. What white people wants to know about racism, uh, but they don't know, by Alice Hasters, and Ich bin ein Black Berliner by John Kevesi Evans, and uh, Deutsch sein und Schwarz dazu, I think by Hans Mazuki. And I'm also using this Thousand Serpentine Angst. So I'm basically trying to analyze autobiographies as well as the fictional works by the Black Germans. So that's why I'm like working with other works as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that response. So I had another question for Bisaula, and this kind of deals with not so much maybe a question, but more so a comment. When you were talking about kind of the models for the paradox of joy and pain, two examples came to mind, and I think you said spirituals in one of your slides, but the example from Frederick Douglass's 1845 narrative, where he goes into the woods and he hears the songs of the slaves, and he says that for those outside the circle, it would appear as if like these are happy songs, that they're joyous, but he says that you can hear the deep pain for those inside the circle, like they recognize the deep pain that's also inside these songs. So again, like that's another example of kind of your thesis of the ways in which these two things aren't always like separated like night and day. But then also from Toni Morrison's, and forgive the U.S. based Black U.S. based examples here, Toni Morrison's Beloved talks about the plantation in Kentucky called Sweet Home. But Sweet Home is it's a plantation where people are exploited and enslaved, but yet the name of it, right, suggests that there's something, memorable and happy and attractive about it. But she says that she can't help but to remember like the beauty of the landscape, even as that landscape was the home of deep pain. So maybe just some other reflections you might have, and just other ways in which like joy and pain are just constantly inextricably connected together and not again like separated as we might imagine.
Okay. So you mentioned Toni Morrison's Sweet Home, even though I'm not familiar with it, but based on how you explained it, what came to mind was how we can find joy and beauty in the midst of our pain. Calling plantation Sweet Home, even though the plantation wasn't a sweet place, but calling it Sweet Home and still seeing the beauty of the location and seeing the sense of community. I think it's how we can find joy in the midst of our pain. Not that we are ignoring the pain, but to not dwell on the pain, to not stay there. Yes, I think I will look for that and read it. Yes, but that's what came to mind, finding beauty in the midst of our pain. So yes, in some sense, that is definitely a paradox. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that's really kind of at the heart of it, in the sense of, and also like the fact that I think several of us have kind of mentioned the fact that we worked on memory, and a few of the bios folks talking about kind of how they work on memory as a part of how they see their work. Memory is also not completely intentional, or even mostly intentional, right? So memory also involves like when you see an image or smell a certain scent, like you'll be almost involuntarily taken to a particular place, right? And when those memories come back to you, the force of them can't adequately be described by the language of joy or pain. It's often a mixture of all those things together. So the sites where pain might happen might also be sites of community, as you're saying, or sites of connection. So the fact that it's involuntarily, it happens on an involuntary level, also kind of complicates questions of agency when we think about memory as well. I think that's really interesting. Um, for Priya, and I think this might apply to maybe a couple other presenters as well. I was struck by thinking about place, the locations that you mentioned. So, for instance, the train station felt like a really paradoxical place to where history kept on revisiting itself against these characters. Because you want to imagine that a train is a place where you kind of go from one location to another, kind of moving forward, right? But several times it says, I think you mentioned in your presentation that the character says it always happens at the train, which to me seems like a very intentional location to kind of highlight how history returns upon itself. And I think Ajibola, as you were talking about the film as well, the scene on the beach, right? Again, which suggests this kind of departure, this kind of movement from one place to another. But the beach is also a liminal space where you're stuck between land and water. So maybe some reflections on how location is critical to thinking through these questions as well. Yeah. So Priya, if you want to just if you have any comments on that. Yeah.
Is Priya jumping into that question? Or
Kite, sorry, actually, I was logged out because of the internet problem.
I'm sorry.
I could able to listen the half part of the your probably observation or question about the train stations where things happening,
Yeah,
repeatedly.
yeah. Just did you attach any particular meaning to the fact that these events kept on happening at the train station and the train being, train station in particular being a symbol of movement forward or someplace else? Did that texture your reading at all? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can interpret through the novel that train stations is space where lots of public come, they come and go. So and they also express for example, the narrator, she and her brother, they were actually racially discriminated at the train stations by a white German couple. So like mostly at the train stations where this you interact with the strangers sometimes also, sometimes positively or negatively as well. So here at the train stations, this movement which is happening of interaction probably is very significant over here. And also that one of the man or the white couple, the man said that they should be sent back to concentration camp and the right train will arrive soon. So it is also an indication of the historical, we go back to the third Reich, and where the trains used to come at the platform, and that they just put all the minority communities or the blacks or the Jewish communities in the train, and then they were sent to for extermination camps, for actually their extermination. So in a way, these train platforms or stations are really significant, both positively and negatively at the same time. It has both connotation, I think.
No, thank you for that. Yeah. Ajibola, did you want to
Yeah.
jump in on that? Mm-hmm.
Yes. I like the question of, I think you were very specific about the beach on the, which what's the first, was in the first scene of becoming black. That's a very good one. Now, so usually in particularly in slavery stories of slavery films, slavery autobiography. Let's talk about the film by Haile Gerima, Sankofa, with the title Sankofa, where the beach was used as a metaphor for what is called in um, you know, as a metaphor to recall the chattel slavery, how, you know, slaves were taken outside of, out of particularly the West African coast, you know, on their way to the ship. And yes, it for that kind of story, it served most definitely as a liminal space between your relative freedom where you are to, you know, to captivity, where you have absolutely no idea what will become of you or your generation. Yes, it worked very quite perfectly in that space, you know, using it as that metaphor. However, Johnson Spain's use of the ocean in becoming black was used differently completely. As a matter of fact, we're also lucky that in one of our interviews, she was able to speak specifically, exactly a part of what I was thinking about before I studied interview myself, where she spoke specifically about her use of the waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And according to her, she said that our use of the water was specifically to I don't know, maybe I can paraphrase that now, to herald a washing, a cleansing, so to say, of, you know, of the experience that may have happened to her in the past. And I go further into that, and my interpretation of that is that there is some obscurity around her paternity that was troubling her for most part of her childhood. Now, in bringing the autobiographical theme and around the story of an ocean in that space, is like, you know, saying that this obscurity is going to end here, and when it ends, I'm going to see what will happen of me. So that's the way I see it, because eventually, after, you know, talking about the past, you know, our mother soliloquizing about how she met her father, you know, and then she stopped, like saying story, and you say story, and then somebody stopped it. So at the end of the day, after the whole realization of who she was, who her family was, what are the things that, you know, the spiritual side of her, she was a little bit still a bit disturbed by the fact that one of the children that was passing by looked at her and, you know, said in the Agwe language that she was a white one. Again, that is part of what Sankofa says. Sankofa says, if you are ready to go to learn of the past, you'll be able, be ready to learn everything, including the present. So that is for that reason, you know, that cleansing of the obscurity of the past, that the waters was used, that you know, by Johnson Spain in that space.
No, thank you for that. And as you mentioned before, right, that the return to the past may not always be a pleasant one, but it kind of allows you to reckon at least with what's there. Well, thank you to all of our presenters. It's been a really wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed learning so much about each of your work, and I think that our audience has also been gratified in that sense as well. So thank you to each of you. We'll be back again tomorrow. Today's day one, but we'll be back again tomorrow with more keynotes and panel presentations, and hope to see you all there as well. Good evening, everyone.
I want to say before we go that I also saw the questions sent by Emily Fraserat. So I've kept them, and we will discuss later about them. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for mentioning that. I'm sorry that I missed those last three questions that came in, and I didn't see them in time to focus on, but Thank you for copying those, and we can definitely follow up in other contexts to discuss. Thank you to all our presenters. Thank you for all your great questions and comments. We appreciate it. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.